Okay, afternoon all. I'm J.S. Wayne, and I'm here to talk about the Soulforger Chronicles, specifically Adeptus and Sybarite. Okay, afternoon all. I'm J.S. Wayne, and I'm here to talk about the Soulforger Chronicles, specifically Adeptus and Sybarite. Sorry, had a little weirdness happening with the feed, so please excuse me for that. We do have a live chat going, so please, by all means. I'm J.S. Wayne, and I'm here to talk about the Soulforger Chronicles, specifically Adeptus and Sybarite. Sorry, had a little weirdness happening with the feed, so please excuse me for that. We do have a live chat going, so please, by all means. I'm J.S. Wayne, and I'm here to talk about the Soulforger Chronicles. Sorry, not sure why that's happening. That's very strange. Hold on a second, please. Sorry, had a little weirdness happening with the feed, so please excuse me for that. We do have a live chat going, so please, by all means. I'm J.S. Wayne, and I'm here to talk about the Soulforger Chronicles. Sorry, not sure why. Yeah, okay, let's see if that's better. All right, let's make sure we're not doing anything strange here. Yeah, all right, all right. I think we're good now. Okay, so yeah, talking about the Soulforger Chronicles, specifically Sybarite, which comes out on May 13th, and Adeptus, which is of course available now for sale at Smashwords, and I'll go ahead and throw the link up there for that in a minute. So before we get started, I do want to talk about something a little more serious, real quick. Specifically, I want to talk about the obvious social distancing. By now, everybody is well aware that that's a thing, and it is real serious. It is definitely a cause for concern. You know, I want to thank the first responders. I want to thank the essential personnel. And I want to thank the people who are working to keep everybody safe and fed and taken care of during this time. This is not easy for anybody. I'm well aware of that. Everybody's aware of that by now. This month feels like it's lasted a century, but it's the only way we're all going to stay safe. So please keep that in mind. Keep doing what you're doing. Yes, being stuck inside sucks. Being cooped up, whether you're by yourself or whether you're with family, significant others, whatever, it's not easy for anybody. And I get that. So my hope is by doing this, maybe it'll take some of the suck out of it, at least a little bit. So, with that in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take a drink of my beer, and then we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you, Pelican Brewing. No, they're not sponsoring this cast. I just really like the beer. So, anyway, hi, hello, Nancy. How are you? I see author Nancy Lopez has joined us. You need to check out her series as well, the Immortal Chronicles, which is very good. Lot of great stuff happening there. Vampires, werewolves. So definitely, please give her a look on Smashwords. Check her out. She's a good author, and she deserves the support. So thank you very much for being here today, Nancy. I appreciate it. So I'm not really sure where to start with all of this. I'd like to give it a little bit, get a couple more people on, before we go into the reading. And I'd also like to just kind of talk a little bit about what's going on in my world. I am currently working on the third book in the Soulforger Chronicles, which is Outcast. It was originally going to be titled Warlock, and I decided against that because in the Soulforger Chronicles world, that's not a very nice word. It's really offensive. It's really insulting, and I chose not to go that route, and instead went with Outcast. But I'm in the process of getting that wrapped up now. Other things I'm doing, I'm drawing. You can see over my shoulder, you've got some of my artwork hanging on the walls. None of it's museum quality, of course, but, it brightens up my walls and it makes me happy. So I think that's good to go. Other than that, I'm reading a lot. I'm spending a lot of time just kind of hanging out just like everybody else, I don't run errands I don't have to. I don't go places I don't have to. On the rare occasion, I'll go make a beer run or whatever. I did that last night. But for now, it's pretty much just staying inside and waiting to see what's going to happen next. So, hopefully everybody's safe and well and in a good position, at least for now, to be able to not worry too much about what's coming up next. So, I guess my first question is, does anybody have any questions for me right now? Do you have anything you want me to talk about? Do you have anything you want to know more about? Do you have anything specific that you'd like to know about the series or that you think other people would like to know? I'm completely open. This is your time to talk to me and tell me what you want to know. So let's chat. So yeah, every so often you will be hearing some typing in the background. I'm pulling up things, I'm getting links, all that good stuff. So, please be patient. I ask for a little bit of indulgence. This is my first live stream, and well, I'm just going to be honest. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. So, if things get a little wonky, I am sorry, and I'm doing my best. That's all I can say. But hopefully, y'all enjoy it. Hopefully, y'all have fun. So, my first question for y'all is, I'd like everybody to choose a number 1, 2, or 3. So, and that's going to become relevant later. But the more people who ring in, of course, the more I'll, the better I can do for y'all. So, please feel free to share this link, tell people what's going on. If you've got a friend who likes urban fantasy or books like, say, The Dresden Files or Kim Harrison's The Hollows, they're probably going to enjoy what I'm bringing to the table. Not necessarily. I certainly wouldn't put myself in the same class as Jim Butcher or Kim Harrison, but I feel like that's pretty strong. I feel like it's good stuff, and I feel like a lot of people are really going to enjoy this series. I think they're going to like my take on magic and things that go bump in the night. So, sorry, train of thought derailed. I hate when that happens. Needless to say, this is completely unscripted. Yes, it is an open public stream, but yes, there is going to be some salty language. There may be some violence. And given my not exactly private proclivities, questions may come up later that some parents may not want their kids necessarily hearing the answers to. And that's understandable. But as far as I'm concerned, that is the parents' responsibility to make sure that, the content you're hearing is suitable for your children. It's very hard to write for adults and then water it down where a 6-year-old can hear about somebody getting their head cut off and not terrorize them, which of course is something I definitely don't want to do. I don't want to be traumatizing children. So please bear that in mind and plan accordingly. If you have young ones in the vicinity, just consider what they're going to be seeing or hearing. As you can see over my shoulder from some of my artwork, if you zoom in, I am not safe for work, household electronics, household pets, barnyard animals, or anything whose name rendered English contains a vowel sound. So please do keep that in mind. Also, please keep the chat civil. If you don't agree with something, that's great. You have every right not to agree with my opinion or with the opinion of someone else, but don't be a dick or I will kick you, because I'm not here for that, and neither are they. Let's have a good time, let's keep it civil, let's keep it cool, and let's have some fun. So, I guess let's start with thank you, Nancy. Glad to hear that you like the sound of typing. That's definitely going to make this a little easier. So let me start telling you about what the Soulforger Chronicles is. It starts with, it's set in Portland, Oregon, but kind of a World of Darkness version of Portland. It's if you've ever played old World of Darkness, Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, etc., you know exactly what I'm talking about. it's kind of that same vibe and feel. It's our world, but it's a world brushed with just a little more darkness and just a little more of the inexplicable in it. You know, things that Joe Average on the street isn't going to notice, but other people and other things do. So I'm really proud of the world that I've built because I feel like it's a very strong magic. I feel like it's a very strong world. It makes a lot of sense. It doesn't blatantly disobey the laws of physics. It doesn't. Everything that happens according to rules and laws. There's magic is its own form of physics, if you will. So, you know, there's not a whole lot of Deus ex machina, which I think is very important. Um, but in the Soulforger Chronicles, you've got David Campbell, who is the protagonist of the series. He's the main character, and we see the world through his eyes. And David Campbell has a complex of powers that permit him to bind willing souls to steel, which is pretty cool, right? But it also comes with some very, very high prices, and it limits his range of motion and his power of action as much as it enables him to do things. David is backed up primarily by his sword, Svetlina, which is a sword. It is a sword that he forged with his own hands, and he did the rites and he did these ceremonies over to bind a spirit to the weapon. But Svetlina is also the spirit of a Russian magus who was also his mentor and his lover. So I don't think I'm giving too much away by telling you that off the bat. But the sword can move on its own. It can act on its own. It is semi-vampiric. And depending on what the survey says, that may or may not get explained later. Or you'll just have to read the book. That's cool too. But magic has its own set of occupations, its own set of rules, its own set of... It has its own society within our society. So most of the same divisions of labor that you see in the broader world, you see in magical society. You have police in the form of the Rekkers, Rekkrs, which is Norwegian for warrior men. And, of course, in the world of the Soulforger Chronicles, it's intended as a non-gendered term. So I maybe should have looked a little more closely into Norwegian gendering conventions for nouns, but I saw it, I liked it, I thought it looked cool, I thought it sounded cool, and I said, okay, let's do this. Excuse me one second, it looks like somebody's having difficulty getting to the stream. Okay, yeah, sorry. So But unlike normal society, there are some divisions of labor which are either ignored, dismissed, or outright criminalized in conventional society. For example, the Sybarites are the sex workers of the magical community, and unlike sex work in regular society, it is not looked down upon, it is not frowned upon, it is considered to be a vital and important service to the community. And similarly, there are all sorts of other parallels and differences. Um, and of course, there's all the usual divisions you would expect. There's necromancy, there's life magic, there's force magic, and all of these fracture down into an almost infinite range of things that you can do with magic. If you've ever dreamed about enchanting a vacuum cleaner so that you didn't have to do the carpet, well, somebody has thought about it. Or somebody in the magical world has probably done it. So, of course, with that kind of power running around, there had to be a foil. And, oh, hello, 3 viewers. So, with all that running around, there had to be a foil. There had to be, dare I say, a villain. And the deeper I delve into this, the more I wonder about the classification of good versus evil. It's really more us versus them, but it's a question of who is serving what agenda is really the question, and everybody at the end of it is kind of serving their own. Much like regular human beings. So I wanted that humanistic element as well, and I didn't want a clear Star Wars division of good and evil. That's boring, it's bland, it's been done before, it's been done nigh unto death. I needed people to be thinking about what goes beyond, what happens beyond those labels. So, I hope that makes sense. David comes from a very ordinary household, middle class. Mom and dad together. They've, everybody's got jobs, everybody's got lives. He has a sister, and all of these people are completely non-magical. They have no idea what David is up to, or why he sometimes shows up for family breakfast looking a little roughed up. Oh, apparently we're having sound issues. That's fun. Okay, well, hopefully that's not a persistent problem. If it is, please let me know. Use the chat if you will, because looks like there's a little bit of a delay on the stream. So, anyway, so having this normal family and having these powers and this talent doesn't make his life any easier. In fact, it makes his life much more difficult, much more challenging, because he has to conceal that from them for their own safety and for his safety. You can't just run around banging a drum talking about magic in Portland and expect that people are A, not going to lock you up for a psych hold, or B, that word's going to get back to people you'd really rather they didn't. So, all of that has to be taken into account, of course. So I've had a lot of fun with this series. I have enjoyed it more, I think, than any book I've written since Dusk. Really, when I really sit down and think about just how much fun I've had with it, because it's got a little bit of everything. It's got all the things I like. It's got action. It's got suspense. It's got a little bit of romance. And I'm really pleased with it. I think it probably stands as my strongest work to date. So, keeping all of that in mind, this is the world in which the Soulforger moves. Excuse me, my allergies are playing up. I swear I don't have a cocaine habit. But my nose keeps itching, and, it's hard to fade that off on a live video. So, I also apologize for the beard. Like everyone else, since I've been in lockdown, I'm channeling my inner Wookiee. So, anyway, so any questions for me so far? Anything that sounds like you want more information? Anything that sounds like you'd like me to expand on? Anything you want to go off topic about? I'm easy. So, the hand puppets were for no reason whatsoever except my own sick amusement, and I freely admit to that. But it's my party, and I figure I can do it if I want to. Because I'm just that kind of guy. So, yeah, this is what a month of social isolation will do to somebody who, wasn't all that stable to begin with. I mean, I play with imaginary friends for a living, so I my my mental floor was a little shaky to begin with, if you get my drift. But yeah, so I wrote the first two books. I wrote Adeptus and I wrote Sybarite. And then I wanted to do a short story, just kind of a fun little vignette kind of thing, and see what I could build off it. Um, and I came up with Ring-a-Ding Demon, which is a novella of the Soulforger Chronicles, which is free right now on Smashwords. I say free right now, but it's going to be free regardless. Hang on one second. Let me go ahead and pull that link up for y'all. And Ring-a-Ding Demon was fun because I felt like it gave a fairly low-stakes introduction to the world of the Soulforger Chronicles and to David Campbell and Svetlana, who, of course, are the main characters. And it kind of gave a glimpse into what kind of world David moves in, without giving away, without risking any spoilers. There are authors who can do microfictions around books that have already happened or in between books that haven't come out yet and somehow manage to avoid giving spoilers. And I really admire that, but I'm not that confident in my ability to not do that myself because I'm sure if I do that, I release a microfiction or a novella or whatever, I turn around later in the next book and I go, oh, wow, look at that. I just gave away half the plot. Good job, moron. Now I have to go back to the drawing board because I don't want to give spoilers. So, yeah, I'm, as you can tell, I'm a little harsh on myself. I can't imagine why. But anyway, so we have one vote so far for 2. So anybody else want to enter the list right now? Anybody want to, pick a number 1, 2, or 3? And like I said, if y'all want to, please by all means, share this around, pass it off to your social media. Tell people who might enjoy this sort of work now that you've, heard a little more about it. And Nancy says, your humbleness is nice. I said, thank you very much for that. I appreciate it. Humility is not generally considered one of my strong suits. Most people go, wow, he's such a nice guy. Or, wow, what an arrogant prick. And to both of them, I say, thank you. It's nice to be recognized for my talents. So, yeah. Yes, this is my first beer of the day. I do not intend for it to be my last, but I am also trying to make it last and, not get sloshed while I'm in the middle of a chat with you fine folks. So, trying not to get too squirrely too early. So another cool thing about the Soulforger Chronicles, from my perspective as a writer, is it gave me a chance to develop relationships and emotional bonds without the expectation in romance that there will be a happy ending. I feel like in fantasy, especially urban fantasy, that assurance of a happy ending is kind of counterintuitive. I mean, yes, there is urban fantasy folded into the erotic romance subgenre, and it works fine. But I like a little more of an edge. I like to know that there are higher stakes and that the happy ending is not guaranteed. No, excuse me. Which sounds very counterintuitive on one hand, because I do love a happy ending. I read a lot of romance in my off time, primarily as a diversion from the real world, just like everybody else. I like happily ever afters. I like love stories. I love reading and watching rom-coms. So, taking all that in mind, I'm also a guy. I like explosions, I like weapons, and I like blood. Give me lots of blood and give me lots of explosions. If there are body parts flying around, I'm probably happy. Not slasher style films, but like Die Hard. Things like that. Horror movies. I haven't watched one in about 10 years, and I'm kind of okay with that. So, but, when your own brain's a 300 ring circus of funhouse, who knows what, you don't really need horror movies. in my opinion. Everybody's got their own take, and some people love slasher movies, and I say more power to you. Enjoy that. Have fun. So, yeah, another fun thing about writing the Soulforger Chronicles is that I get to base it off places that I really like in Portland. The St. John's Bridge, for example, um, is probably my favorite bridge in Portland, which I'm sure everybody has a favorite who gives it any thought. Um, excuse me one second. So, getting to show these places and look at them in terms of their uniqueness or their Portlandness, if you will. Um, it's a lot of fun because I'm not a native Portlander. I kind of wish I was because, well, this is very much my kind of town. But I have not lived here my whole life. So I kind of get that chance to play tourist and say, oh, hey, look at this cool thing I saw. Oh, hey, look at this over here. The OHSU tram, etc. Those are pretty cool. Anybody who lives in Portland knows about the OHSU tram. The rivers. Yeah, it's a very cool city. It's a very eclectic city. You go from major metropolitan anywhere to kind of a suburban feel to kind of a rundown feel to kind of a funky, eclectic vibe that you really only get here, in my experience. And I've moved around enough to see some fairly bohemian places, but you don't really see it the same way you do here in Portland, and especially the area around PSU. So that's a lot of fun too, getting to point up these unique or interesting things about the city. And of course, it's also fun because I have real life references that I can look at and I can say, okay, how would this work in this situation? What do I do with that situation? What do I do? What happens if David goes off this bridge? And in fact, I learned that the St. John's Bridge is actually higher than the Golden Gate Bridge, which was a sobering thought when I realized that I was in fact going to launch him off it at some point. And if you want to know when that was, stay tuned, and I will be giving away copies of Ring a Ding Demon, Adeptus, and Sybarite later in the stream. Nancy's asking, what about thrillers? Um, I almost kind of file them in the same category, depending on the type, I guess. Like a Tom Cruise thriller, Jack Reacher. That one, I consider that a thriller. It's an action movie, and I like it. Die Hard, again, thriller, action movie, and I like it. Uh, but the kind of movie where you've got people falling into wood chippers every 3.5 seconds, not so much. And it's just because I look at that, and after a certain point, it becomes so deathly serious, it becomes hard to take seriously, I think. Uh, I do like a well-done ghost movie, though. That's different. Stir of Echoes with Kevin Bacon was excellent. Sleepy Hollow with Johnny Depp and Christopher Walken was great. But as a general rule, I like I tend to like my entertainment a little more fluffy because there's what I write on the page and there's what happens in my head when I sleep, and I kind of like to get away from that for my entertainment. So, the warm, sappy, gooey, aw, they has a love story. I'm good with that. Unless, of course, I really want to see somebody get a car dropped on top of them, in which case, Nicolas Cage, paging Nicolas Cage. Ah. So that is that's kind of my theory. I like to ingest a broad spectrum of material because you never know where your ideas are going to come from. But when it comes to slasher, gore, horror, supernatural sort of who's it's, unless it's done in a really unique way, probably been there and done that. I've probably had something weirder pop up in my head over the course of a bad night, which, when you have depression and anxiety and bipolar disorder, yeah, it's a thing that happens. So, anyway, so just throwing the shout out again. Please select 1, 2, or 3. I'm taking votes, and that will become relevant here in just about 10 minutes or so, I think. Because I figure we've probably got all the people viewing that are going to be right now, so. Okay, good on that. Yeah, please excuse me, I'm double checking various things as I go, so, there's a certain amount of clicking around happening right now. So yeah, if you're watching right now, please please send a shout out in the chat. Say hey, or tell me what you want to talk about. Tell me what you want to hear. Well, that yeah, we'll go with that. I say I express myself so much better in print than I do in video, and that's one of my quirks as well. Okay, so we have Nancy voting for 2, Kendall voting for 1. Anybody care to be a tiebreaker? And by the way, hello, Kendall. Thank you so much for joining. Well, shoot, if this keeps up, I will just roll dice. I'm good with that, too. Well, you're doing it now, so you're good to go. Okay. So, meanwhile, while we're waiting for either a tiebreaker or for me to roll the dice, I do want to say I'm really excited about this, and I'm really excited about the Soulforger Chronicles, and I really, really hope that y'all enjoy it as much as I enjoy writing it. Outcast will be coming out in September, and after that, I probably won't release Chieftain, which will be the fourth book, until probably May or June of next year. Just because there's a lot more. The stakes are always getting higher. And yes, Nicolas Cage is definitely an interesting actor. He's probably one of the more oddball Hollywood success stories, but I do like his range, and I like the way I like the way he portrays things so over the top that you're almost not sure whether to make fun of it or go, wow, this guy is really, really off his rocker, and we should probably take him seriously. Because otherwise, he's going to go down to a convenience store and start playing Duck, Duck, Goose with a rifle. Of course, we would hope that Nicolas Cage would not actually do that, or anybody else. But he does have a presence that's all his own. Kind of like Jack Nicholson. Jack Nicholson, you never see Jack Nicholson playing in anything that he's not Jack Nicholson or Christopher Walken. He's always Christopher Walken. Female counterparts to that would be Judi Dench and Meryl Streep. Those are two really good examples of that. They take characters and they inhabit them so completely that it's hard to look at them later and not go, well, of course, Meryl Streep. Well, of course, Judi Dench. Who else could have pulled that off? They make it seem like you would have been an idiot to choose anybody else. So, yeah, I do like evaluating actors. I like watching their performances, and I like considering them both in their own person and as the character. And the ones I listed are just some of my go-tos for truly great acting. On the other side of that curve, you've got William Shatner, who, great actor. I nothing but love for Captain Kirk, but he's always William Shatner from the William Shatner School of Acting. So, yes, I did promise horrible impressions. I did say this was going to happen at some point during the stream. And it probably will again. So, bear that in mind. Anyway, well, you know what? I am going to go ahead and I am going to employ the world's oldest decision-making device. To break this deadlock, we have 2 and we have 1. So, heads or tails? You know what? One will be heads. Oh. Okay, one will be heads, two will be tails. And it is heads. So, if y'all will bear with me for just 1 second, I am going to go ahead and I am going to bring up the scene in question. Okay. All right, we're all queued up. And here we go. I passed through the asphalt, smoother and easier than falling into a warm swimming pool, hands stretched out before me as if I was executing a swan dive. The patter of the omnipresent November rain and the electronically amplified bellows of the female police officer's orders cut off, broken cleanly by the sepulchral, relentless gray of my new surroundings. Everything was blissfully silent, dry, and relatively safe. Safe, that is, for the whole second and a half which elapsed between my entry and the instant I heard the eerie screech from behind and above me, a cross between the call of an unthinkably large whale and the seething high notes of a synthesizer. Shit. Time to get out. I pulled open another rift as something with ghastly strength wrapped itself around my left quadriceps and squeezed. Hard. The world exploded from dull, sullen gray into vibrant color and pitiless, eye-aching light as I dropped through the rift. I tumbled about 6 inches, plunking face down onto an uneven series of hard surfaces. An unexpected half-foot drop was more than enough to rattle your teeth and other bony bits, but not nearly enough time to mitigate the impact. Under my chest, one of said surfaces broke with an expensive-sounding crunch, emitting a rapid series of plaintive electronic beeps. Something else crashed below me and off to my right, as my sword tumbled from my fingers, striking the carpet with a muted thump. The blade lay there for a moment, and then rose up under its own steam. I didn't have the time or bandwidth to care about any of that. The pressure against my ribs from the crunchy, beepy thing abruptly amplified as a sudden weight on my back smushed me into everything under me, driving the wind from my lungs with a pitiful little wheeze. The impact felt and smelled like taking a square hit in the small of my back with 500 pounds of putrid meat and unwashed gym socks, which had been fermenting away in some jock's locker for a year. The key difference being, unlike the thing on my back, nasty socks and rotten steak can choke you with their stench, but they don't normally have the wherewithal to physically strangle you to death. If this had been the first time I'd had someone or something try to choke the life out of me tonight, my evening would have been plenty bad enough. Being slowly throttled is the sort of experience which most sane people don't look forward to repeating, and simply never gets dull, no matter how many times they live through it. But this is me we're talking about here, I'm seldom lucky enough to piss off just one person, creature, or extra-dimensional beastie at a time. A masculine but surprisingly high-pitched voice snapped, "David, how did you—" "No time to chat," I gasped, clutching with both hands at the chilly, slick, grayish-brown tentacle wrapped around my throat. The pseudopod tightened a little more in response to my struggles. "Help!" A metallic rattling resounded from the walls, followed by a ripping, tearing whoosh. Gruesome, wet thumps and slashes underscored a bubbling, liquid shriek of rage and mortal agony. The creature on my back reared up and away, and that damned tentacle relaxed and dropped off my neck. I flattened as best I could and rolled to one side, gasping as the solid surface beneath me fell away. It was okay. The floor caught me. Naturally, I landed on my back, because why should my sternum have all the fun? The impact drove what little breath I had managed to keep in my chest out of my lungs. There didn't seem to be enough air in the air, a problem compounded by my drop-stunned diaphragm. Little black and red sparkles danced in front of my eyes, and I blinked rapidly in a bid to fight back the greasy darkness encroaching on the edge of my field of vision. The tactic worked well enough for me to see a thrashing nest of tentacles about 3 feet above my head. In the air above that, unaided by human hands, enough edged melee weapons to stock a modest-sized Renaissance fair drifted up through a fine mist of vile purple droplets to slam down out of my line of sight, the impact punctuated by sounds I would normally associate with a butcher shop. My own weapon, a sword patterned loosely after the design of a Greek kopis, whose guard and hilt bristled with wickedly sharp spikes, spines, and edges, flitted around among its less elegant fellows like a hawk among geese. Its kukri-like, inward-curved steel edge was mucky and streaked with the ichor that passed for the what's-its blood. The blade mimicked raindrop Damascus, but closer inspection would reveal the pattern moved of its own accord, in feverishly strobing monochrome flickers. With a final scream, the creature subsided into stillness, its tentacles draping off the desk like so much beached seaweed. The weapons whizzed around the corpses as if waiting for further movement. I stayed down. That much steel flying through the air, coupled with the uncertainty of whether the weapons knew friend from foe, made down seem like a much safer plan. Everything hurt, but not badly enough for me to care to risk sticking my head into the Cuisinart soaring around the desk above me. "Are you all right?" Hearing voices in your head which aren't your own is universally considered an ominous sign of deteriorating mental health. But hey, I'm a magus. Claiming sanity simply isn't on the list of available privileges when you muck about with the inner workings of the universe on the daily. In this case, I just called it another Rose City Friday night and answered Svetlina. "Ugh," I said. "I think I'll just lie here for a century or so." Seemingly convinced the critter wouldn't be getting up again, the weapons drifted back to their places on the walls, and clanked and clattered their way back onto their various hooks and hangings. Oh, excuse me. Let me wet my whistle here for a second. Their veriform blades flung the light back cleanly, beneath the oily sheen of purple-brown blood giving mute evidence that these weapons had just participated in an exceedingly one-sided bloodbath. With one exception. My sword hovered just over and behind my head. Although weapons don't generally have expressions or the means to express them, something about the way it moved suggested vigilance and extremely prejudicial attention to its surroundings. The goop streaking the metal shivered and vanished, accompanied by a sound from Svetlina much like a noise of distaste I might make if someone tried to Trojan horse broccoli into my food. "Stop whining." A hand the size of the hubcap on a luxury car hove into view from my left. "And get up." The voice coming from the owner of the hand always caught me off guard. "Oh, excuse me." even after years of opportunities to build up a resistance. You'd expect a baritone or even bass from someone his size, but his usual pitch was somewhere between alto and countertenor, and a bit squeaky. As disconcerting as it was to hear that high voice coming from that huge body, I was glad for it right now. It meant he was currently in a good mood, or at least not a bad one. And no, the two things are not the same. I winced and took the hand, which closed around mine with unnatural strength and hauled me up to a reasonable if wobbly facsimile of a standing position. I looked from the hand to its own. "Can you let go of my hand?" I gave it a try. My knees sagged a bit, but I managed to stay upright without assistance. Grim gave me an apprising once-over. "Better. Sit down before you fall down." I did, sinking onto the wooden Danish modern chair in front of what remained of his desk unceremoniously. My backpack's contents currently involved a lot of sharp corners, most of them aligning neatly with various bumps and bruises I'd sustained throughout the evening. I muttered a curse, wiped a rivulet of cold rainwater from my head, and pulled the bag off, unzipping it so I could withdraw a trio of empty, heavy-walled plastic vials with twist tops. "What are you doing with those?" Grim was just settling himself into the captain's chair behind his desk, which at the moment most nearly resembled a butcher's block, hosting a three-way orgy involving Cousin It, a giant squid, and a koosh ball, over which someone had dumped an industrial-sized pot of spaghetti topped with some sort of octopus ink sauce, in preparation for a little eldritch plooshing. He pushed backward toward the wall, and away from the mess, in a show of fastidious concern about the ongoing welfare of his too expensive suit. "I'm collecting samples." "As sage, I forbid it. There's nothing here that can be used in a way which won't cause more trouble than it resolves." I looked up into Grim's face, which was set in a calm, unnervingly deadpan expression which would have been equally at home and scary at a board meeting, over a chessboard, or giving the attack order to a horde of Vikings. Having personally seen him in two of the three situations, and knowing for a fact he'd done the third, I decided now was not the time to tempt fate further. Moving slowly, partly because my everything hurt, and partly to avoid provoking Grim into doing something unfortunate to bits of one David Edward Campbell, which I'd become really accustomed to having intact and functional, I put the vials back in my bag and zipped it shut. I dropped the bag on the floor, leaned back in my own chair, and studied him. Grimmer Arnolfsson looked like the sort of businessman you hoped had business elsewhere, rather than with you personally. His custom-tailored midnight blue pinstripe suit showed off 7.5 feet of hulking muscle, topped off by chestnut hair which fell down halfway down his back, and a beard a few shades darker which would have made Billy Gibbons tip his hat. The beard all but obscured his crisp white shirt and power tie, lending him the aspect of the sort of lawyer who would enthusiastically and earnestly defend war criminals in The Hague. He was also a Viking, the real thing, and I mean that in every sense of the word. 1,000 years ago, a guy tall enough to look Sasquatch in the eye without craning his neck, and built with thick, heavy slabs of muscle to match, would have looked a proper and terrifying giant to anyone with misfortune to meet him on the wrong side of a raiding party. And that's before considering the fact he had been born into the vampire oligarchy of the Wild North. Even in modern times, he made any space he entered seem too small to contain his hulking frame. Based solely on appearance, it would be easy to dismiss him as a basic brute, someone who relied on size and sheer main strength as his chief advantages. It would also be a deadly mistake. Vampire or not, magus or not, no one survives 1,000-odd years in an ever-changing world without becoming adept at a diverse skill set. He was an incredibly skilled and knowledgeable practitioner of the arts, a shrewd diplomat and politician, and a formidable tactician. He could recite Shakespeare, Ben Jonson, and Rumi flawlessly from memory, and enumerate the winners and losers of every major battle since his birth anywhere on the planet, explaining in concise terms exactly how the weather, terrain, force disposition, and armaments of the opposing side could have swayed, affected, or altered the outcome one way or the other.
Excuse me. Those skills translated well into a lot of different fields of endeavor and leisure. His fluid vampiric grace and talent for the genteel art warfare of statecraft had also made him, among a legion of other things, an excellent ballroom dancer. His innate understanding of tactics and military strategy had earned him a Grandmaster rating from the International Chess Federation, and he routinely beat the brakes off me across the board on the rare occasions our respective leisure time and proximity coincided. I could count on one hand, with fingers to spare, the number of times I'd beaten him, and he damn well made me earn it each time. He was also one of the few friends, or at least allies, I could legitimately claim. Behind me, the door burst open, and a quartet of grim-faced people in suits, which cost more apiece than the maintenance on my entire life for a month, burst into the room, their enchanted polearms floating along in front of them. They fanned out in a rough diamond formation, covering every corner of the room, and my breath caught, despite myself. The magical world has its own rules and laws. Of course, for laws to be practical, someone has to enforce them. In the Portland Mother House, that task fell to the wreckers, literally warrior men in Norwegian. Other mother houses had guardians, wardens, enforcers, and so on, according to the preferences, traditions, and linguistic antecedents of their founders. No matter what you called them, they all fulfilled largely the same functions, protecting the mother house, the sage, and the magical population in more or less that order, policing and enforcing the laws which govern magic, and, when necessary, serving as military forces. My gut clenched. I prefer to keep a low profile and a long distance from law enforcement of any kind, and that went triple for the wreckers for a whole laundry list of reasons. I tried to look cool and unconcerned, but suspected I only managed to give the appearance of someone suffering from acute food poisoning. The squad's commander, a buzz-cut guy in his early 30s who looked like he'd done some hardcore military time, stared at the carnage in the room and shot me a black look, then turned to Grim. "What happened, Sage?" Grim gave me a secretive little smile. "It's all right, Mr. Robeson. Mr. Campbell was assisting me with an audit of the Mother House's defenses. He appears to have identified a couple of unanticipated weaknesses. Please advise Chieftain Shields I will need to speak with her further about this matter." He held up a finger in a dryly bemused gesture. "Also, send in the cleaning crew and arrange for a new desk." He raised an eyebrow at me. "And a replacement laptop." Robeson looked like he wanted to argue, or at least ask more than a few follow-up questions, but settled for glowering at me in a manner which promised trouble at some later date, and said only, "Yes, sir. I'll see to it at once." "Good. Thank you for your quick response. You may go." A fresh-faced kid who looked like she should have been getting ready for pep squad practice and making really fun yet very poor life choices in the backseat of the school quarterback's car, instead of policing the magical population of Portland and its environs, was the last one out the door. The look she shot me over her shoulder suggested she'd be watching me. I tried not to let the terror her gaze bestowed upon me show. Probably give me a bad mani-pedi or something if I cross her, paint my nails glittery pink or some other such nonsense. I waited until the door latch clicked behind her and rounded on Grim. "Are you kidding me? You know they didn't buy any of that." Grim winked, the timbre of his voice dropping lower with an unmistakable warning. "I didn't need them to buy it, as you put it. I simply needed them to do my bidding and be gone." He poked a finger downward at the otherworldly corpse sprayed across his desk. The bit of furniture had assumed a real abstract art vibe, as if some lunatic with delusions of being an artist had sculpted it out of oddly positioned matchsticks, and then drenched it in half-burnt barbecue sauce. "Now, would you be so kind as to get this thing off my desk?" I grimaced. "You may just want to empty the desk and clean off anything you don't want to lose." "And why is that?" "Because I can't target the portal precisely enough to take out just the creature. Besides, I don't know if you've noticed, but your desk is kind of shot anyway." He complied, giving me an arch look which, in saner circumstances than I'd just endured, might have made me nervous. A notebook, a few pens, a graphic novel whose cover boasted Batman leaping from a building with his teeth bared in an enraged snarl, and a desktop calendar featuring Dilbert of all things, went on the floor against the wall. Then he opened a drawer and withdrew a large blue ring binder, an earthenware tankard-sized beverages served up in the average movie theater, and several bottles containing, going by their labels, very high-end varieties of booze. Opening his hands in an expansive gesture, he slid his chair next to the pile. The laptop's destroyed. Disposing of it will lose you nothing of consequence. You may proceed, Mr. Campbell. I winced. Sorry about the computer. We have larger problems. Do you have the strength for this? The light, feminine voice had a Slavic accent into which one could drive nails. We'll find out. Grim raised an eyebrow and lowered it. Are you talking to Svetlana? She's worried about me. I tried to project glib confidence, as if having just had the ethereal shit kicked out of me for most of an hour was no big deal. I don't blame her. You looked like you stopped a flying porcupine with the side of your face. Lucky you can still see out of that eye. And... He broke off and tilted his head, his eyes narrowing speculatively. Is that a gunshot graze on the left side of your scalp? I'd forgotten about that, I muttered. Grim's posture took on an incredulous bent. Don't look at me in that tone. It's been an interesting night. Anything else I should be aware of? I'm curious about that myself, Svetlana chimed in, modeling textbook Russian irony for all she was worth. Some bumps and bruises, wounded pride, no big. I'll be the judge of that, Grim waved his hand. Proceed. I'm starting to remember why I punched you in the mouth that one time, I grumbled. Try it, he smirked. As bedraggled and beaten down as you look right now, I'm sure I could put you on your back with a single finger. You could do that anyway. Probably true. Still, I suggest you not. He lowered his chin to peer up at me over sleek little octagonal reading glasses. I indulged your displeasure with me once. Because it was politically expedient, I shot back. David, be careful. He probably won't bother to throat you, but I wouldn't overtax his coping mechanisms right now. I glanced down at the desk. The laptop was still making that damnable beeping. Under the creature's corpse, I could just see the upper right quadrant of the screen. The lid had been bent well backward past any angle the engineers who designed it could possibly have intended for regular use. Even worse, the glass screen had crazed into the cringe-worthy yet beautiful sort of spiderweb pattern, which heralds a humongous repair bill at best, and at worst a significant ding in the old bank account courtesy of Best Buy. Holding my breath to avoid the creature's reek, I stood and placed my hands flat on a clear section of wood at the edge of the desk. Then I reached. So, there you go. That is Chapter 1 of Adeptus. So, no, looks like we've lost some people. Where did everybody go? Hello? So, yeah, please excuse me for a moment. I am going to go get myself a drink of water, and I will be right back. Oh, there we go. Okay. I am now hydrated. I am back. And we can continue. um, oh, crap. Oh, okay, here we go. It looks like we're back. Maybe? Yes, we are back. Okay. Sorry, there was some weirdness on the screen. I wasn't sure what that was all about. So, yeah, that is the first chapter of Adeptus, which, of course, Kindle was kind enough to help us decide on. So, y'all may have noticed while I was away, I had that slideshow up, and that's a render that I did of Svetlana just to kind of give a reference for what she looks like. And I think it's kind of cool because, for one thing, I had never played with rendering before, and I had also never actually created a weapon in 3 dimensions like that. So I had a lot of fun with it, and I really enjoyed building that out. Of course, I still need to paint it. I've got a ton of things I have to do with it to kind of clean it up. But it gives a pretty good visual reference for what Svetlana looks like. So, does anybody have any questions, comments, things you'd like me to expand on a little bit from that excerpt? Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, hopefully the next one of these I do will go a lot smoother because I'll have a better idea of what to expect. So, yes, I want to start the stream. Stop. What are you doing? Killing me here. Okay, so Nancy asked, how did you decide on what the world was essentially going to be? And that's a great question. I wanted to build a world that I could see myself walking in, like every other writer. So I thought, okay, what if I took Portland, Bridge City, Rose City, call it what you will, and gave it that half twist, added that magic in, added that conceptual what if. What if there was actually real magic going on in Portland? What would it look like? Who would police it? How would it work? How would it function? And the more I looked at it, the more I thought about it, Yeah. Due to lag, we're going to go ahead and cut this short. I will continue this in chat, so please, by all means, get at me there. But we're going to go ahead and cut the stream now because I don't know why, but we're having streaming issues. I will go ahead and edit this later so that we get the good stuff. But thank you very much for coming. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for your support. And please stay safe, stay inside, stay healthy, and take care of yourselves. Y'all take care.